These are pictures of downtown Pittsburgh. That was the Gulf building. This is alongside the river. We're in a taxi cab headed for the airport. There's the Fort Pitt Bridge. That's I think the Hilton Hotel in downtown Pittsburgh. Here we're approaching the Fort Pitt tunnels, Fort Pitt Bridge, Fort Pitt tunnels, headed for the airport on our way to Sweden. February 23rd, 1960. Make that 1960, yeah, 61, 1961. There's the airport building. Here's our Capital Airlines plane, an old DC-6. At this point we thought it was going to be a piece of cake. We're going to take off and land at Kennedy Airport and have an hour or two to go get ready and go on the plane to Sweden. As it turned out, weather closed in. We had to land in Washington, D.C., get on a train, get to New York City, check into a hotel, stay overnight, get out to the airport the next morning to find out we'd completely missed our plane, of course, the night before. There was no planes until evening again, and we nearly missed the plane the second time because they failed to call us at the airport. So we weren't able to sit together. Here we are in Gothenburg. This is a statue of Poseidon, which is at the head of the boulevard in Gothenburg. And that's a big museum and music hall in Gothenburg. The first night in Gothenburg, we stayed in a house full of bric-a-brac that this little old lady, last name was Johansson, had a house absolutely full of antiques and so forth, and was scared to death as the Americans came in with 4 kids. I left on the following Monday morning for Gothenburg. Ruth and the kids stayed in this house. These are all shots taken out over the city of Gothenburg. The family is now on a train. I went back from from Sandviken to Gothenburg, got the family, and we're on a train from Gothenburg to Sandviken. Trip took probably 6 or 8 hours. We had our own compartment on the train. That was nice, but it was still a long, long ride. And this being February, the scenery was interesting, but really not that pretty. The train first goes north from Gothenburg, then turns east. Sandviken is nearly across the country. It's about 20 miles from the east coast of Sweden and in the central part of Sweden. It's a railroad station alongside. There's a fella, railroad employee, walking up the steps to his little station. This looks like the station at Sandviken, perhaps. Not sure where that was. No, must not have been, because that's the big lake that's north of Stockholm. I mean, north of Gothenburg. I don't know what station that may have been. I think this is probably a Sunday, week after we arrived in Sweden. You can see as we get farther north now, we're starting to see some snow. Get away from Gothenburg gets very little, if any, snow. Now you can see that the lakes are frozen. There's snow on the ground. farther north and the farther east we go, the more snow and the more cold we're going to see. For a good part of the distance between Sandviken, or on this trip, you go beside the what they call the Jutta Canal. There's a canal that they dug entirely across Sweden. It's part of it's natural, part of it's man-made. So they can actually ship by barge from Stockholm on the east coast to Gothenburg on the west coast. I think a lot of the frozen ice that we see is that Jutta Canal. There's a picture of David, Ellen. This is an apartment house in Sandviken. We finished our train ride. We settled into the hotel. This is a picture across the street from the hotel. It's an apartment building. You can see that instead of using dry cleaners, sometimes the Swedes just hang the clothes outside in the winter air to air out. These are shots from the hotel. There's our hotel room. We had two rooms with a connecting door. Still, it was awfully tight quarters, and we were here for nearly 7 weeks.
Open the doors, cool.
David got sick while we were there, and quite ill. He had a bad case of the flu or travel or whatever. Here we are in the marketplace on a Saturday morning in Sandviken. Beautiful sunny day. Farmers all come into town, bring their fruits and vegetables. I don't know who took this picture. It may have been me, but whoever it was pretty quick on the pan shots. But it gives you an idea. This little marketplace is right behind our hotel, so very easy to walk over and see what was for sale.
Those aren't the lights in the picture painting there, or they just like them?
They're just like them.
This is a picture of the downtown and the section of Sandviken. Oh, I remember that was a lady's hair shop, beauty shop. One of the neighborhoods in Sandviken. Notice all the houses are almost uniformly the same color. A typical Swedish house has a stucco exterior. Here's the church by the town park in Sandviken. Mark's birth is registered in this church. This is in the courtyard of the church. Another shop downtown with a beautiful, beautiful Swedish glass in it. Here's a picture of the lake by Sandviken. You'll notice it's still wintertime when we got there. We had pretty heavy snowfalls in March. These are little summer cottages along the lake. Lake at Sandviken is about 15 miles long, and perhaps half a mile to a mile wide. Long, narrow lake that runs nearly east and west, just full of little islands. As we found out later when Jeff Long bought a sail. Some more pictures of the lake. You can see now the ice is starting to melt. The ice really never left the lake until late May, early June. We're quite far north, within about 200 miles of the Arctic Circle. Here's where we borrowed a car. We were able to borrow a car for the weekend and went for a ride out in the country. The roads are relatively clear and it's a relatively warm day. There's still some snow on the ground. Beautiful high sky, as they say in Sweden, which means a clear, crystal clear blue sky. There's the bridge from Sandviken over an arm of the lake. Well, this is in the, that was a steam hammer that's sort of the symbol of Sandviken. On all of their, on the city flag and so forth, you'll see it. This is a church between Sandviken in Gävle. There's just some boys playing with a dog outside the hotel in Sandviken. You'll notice that it's getting warmer now. Kids don't have the big heavy coats on anymore. No leaves on the tree and the grass isn't green yet, but it's getting towards spring. That's Jillian and David. David, age 5 the day before we left. Jillian, Denise, and Jeffrey Long's youngest child. This is the first house that we lived in Sandviken. Great big house, but we had very little furniture. Did have a nice lot and a nice yard. We stayed in the hotel about 6 or 7 weeks. And then we moved into this house, and we were here, I think, a couple of months through the early part of the summer. Then we were able to get into a row house in another part of town. I believe that's the house of some friends of ours named Pinner. Yes, there's Kurt Pinner. He's one of the Swedish fellows I worked with. He had just gotten out of Germany ahead of the Nazis. I'm not sure, I think maybe that's Kurt's boy. Yes, it is. That is Kurt's son. That's his wife, Annetta Pinner. I want to picture her. They were really nice people, and they really treated us nice too. And that was their daughter. Pretty girl. Lori, with her daughter. This is a picture taken from the front yard of the first house that we lived in Sweden. I said in the the last house that we lived in was on Sprutgatan. That's not true. The first house we lived in was on Sprutgatan. That cloud formation was very unusual. We call that the night the sky turned upside down. These are some scenes from the yard of the house. There's our friend Pete Pruzan playing with David. That's a picture of a Swedish porcupine. This again is a picture of the marketplace and in back of the hotel in Sandviken. There's Ruth shopping for probably fruit. us a little park in Sandviken, maintained by the maintenance crew at the local steel mill. Beautiful little park, a statue of a mermaid. They did a beautiful job of keeping up the town. This is a picture of a church on the way to Gävle. Gävle is a seacoast town to the east of Sandviken, right on the Baltic. These pictures were taken when we first arrived in Sweden. About a year later is Mark will be born, and he'll be born in a hospital in this little town in February. It's a busy little seaport, not as busy as Göteborg or Gothenburg. Or Stockholm, but a busy little seaport.
That's it, right there.
Okay, next up, Mount Clemens.
Yeah.
Get in the car.
We were lucky enough when we first went to Sweden on the Easter weekend to be able to borrow a car for the weekend. And we drove over to a zoo just south of Gävle, between Gävle and Uppsala. The picture of some reindeer in the zoo. This is Janie feeding the reindeer. Ellen feeding the reindeer. Now, David will come close, but he'll never get close enough so the reindeer can get to him. He takes a couple of tries at it, gets within about a foot. But that's as close as he gets. Here comes Lori. They had a little coach in the park. The kids went for a ride in the coach. That's our kids in the coach. Also had a little train that you could ride on. Mostly children, a few adults. Of course, our kids had to go for a ride on the train. Here's David on a sort of a merry-go-round type of deal. Looks like he's driving a lobster boat. They have a Ferris wheel. This is like a sort of a tilt-a-whirl, but the top closes. Big canvas top that slowly rolls over, and they end up going around in the dark. David on another type of merry-go-round. Ellen and Jane in a bumper car looking for victims. Wasn't a very large zoo, but they had a nice mix of animals. It's a little flower garden on the entry road to the zoo. I forget what that thing is. There's some European bison. Now these are not American bison. These are European bison. As you can see, they do all the things, however, that American bison do. There's a Swedish duck. There are quite a few little ponds in the park, and quite a few different kinds of waterfowl. This, as I said earlier, this was the Easter weekend. Whoops, there's a goose that strayed across the ocean from Canada somehow. This was the Easter weekend. There was no snow on the ground, but it was still quite cold, as you can see from our jackets. We went for a short drive down a little road, and here we are on the shores of the Baltic Sea. You can see the shoreline is entirely rock. I don't think there's a sandy beach in Sweden, at least as far as I know. Both the east and west coasts of Sweden are very rocky, very much like this. There's Laurie and Jane are walking down on the rocks by the sea. At this point, we'd been cooped up in the hotel for several weeks, and it was great to get out. Back in the zoo again. Here's a Swedish harbor seal. He has a good time playing with a branch that fell in the water. Seemed to enjoy the attention of the crowd. There's a peacock in full spread, some little baby peacocks, some penguins in a little rookery they had there. This is the headquarters building for the zoo. Tried to get a close-up picture of the peacock, but he wouldn't hold still. Later on that same summer, we went for a weekend on an island off of Stockholm. Here we're on our way there, and we stopped in the town of Uppsala, which is a famous university town. Has a cathedral, beautiful old cathedral with twin spires on it. We'd stopped to give the children a chance to stretch their legs and just walk around this park in the middle of town. This is on the island out in. Remember, many feet of film. We showed you Uppsala, and said we were on our way to an island off of Stockholm. This is on the island, and those are the parents of Eva van den Meisenberg. That's their new daughter. Born about the same time as Mark, and really bulked up. This is quite a boat trip from Stockholm out through the islands. There's David with his friend, Pug. Is that a pug, David? I don't know. Dave's not too happy with that big pork on his pork sitting on his. Near the town of Sandviken was a mountain called Kungsberg, or King's Mountain in English. We spent a lot of time when we were in Sweden up on this mountain. The summertime we'd go hiking. The fall we'd come up on the mountain and pick blueberries and lingonberries, which are Swedish cranberries. And in the wintertime we'd go skiing on the mountain. These are some panoramic views from the top of the mountain, showing the Swedish countryside. Very similar to Pennsylvania. Relatively low hills, flat valleys, some farms in the valleys. This is Ruth's English friend, Denise Long, with her youngest daughter, Jillian. There we are walking down off the mountain to get back to the cars. This was a holiday or a weekend in July. We went to a little inland lake to go swimming. You can see that the swimsuits are not normal attire for young children in Sweden. Water's quite cold. We went swimming, but we sure didn't stay in very long. It was nice to get out of the water and into the sun. There's Jeffrey Long, that's Denise's husband. English fella that I worked for the same company I did at the steel mill, also on a different project than mine. There's the Long's daughter, Jillian, with her little great big teddy bear. I don't know, that's, is that you, David?
I'm not sure.
Some more wildflower pictures and taken in the autumn. There's Jeffrey Long and Jillian. It's a pretty warm day. That looks like, yeah, it's up on Kungsberg, and we're picking blueberries and lingonberries. That's Ruth, yeah, that's Ruth, with her little picker thing in hand. There's some lingonberries. There's some blueberries. When we were up in Alaska a couple of years ago, we found out that they have the same blueberries and lingonberries in Alaska also, which apparently is about the same climate as Sweden. Lingonberries doesn't work too well. There's another picture of the lingonberry bushes. We had a little scooper you could buy in a store that had fingers on it. You bent down and scooped up everything on the bush, and then when you got home, you sorted them out. That's just appears to be a mountain ash. More wildflowers. Sort of like a snapdragon wildflower. have no idea what that bush is.
Still looks like a mountain ash or a
Yeah.
willow.
It's a low-growing bush that, as David says, very similar to a mountain ash. Bright red berries.
Looks like the willows they have in Alaska too.
There's a thistle, I think. Looks like a thistle. Here's Jeffrey Long's boat. That's actually the lake by Sandviken. As I said earlier, the lake is just filled with islands, both above water and below water. And you literally had to navigate the lake by landmarks and everything else to avoid all the rocky underwater shoals. We hit a lot of them. I think that's Jeff and his boat. In fact, I'm sure that's Jeff and his boat. It's about a 25-foot boat, had a little tiny cabin on it. You really couldn't go into the cabin. It wasn't that large. We sure had a lot of fun on it. I don't think Jeff ever let me sail it. I was strictly a passenger. Here comes Jeff and Sandra on the front, Ann sitting down, and Jeff. Here's David in his famous Scottish swim trunks at the beach at the lake. As I said earlier, that water was really cold, but the kids didn't seem to mind it as much as the adults did. Got a piece of dirt on the lens. That's too bad. Here we are on the beach where we spent most of the time. At least the older folks did.
The bridge has always been the same.
Yep, I remember that.
But it's not very good.
And we'd have to take pass a swimming test in the spring.
Oh.
In school, they would bring us
Yes,
out here.
yes.
Remember? Did you do that?
No,
You have to
yeah,
prove that you
yes, but
could
that
swim?
was on the other side.
Was it?
No. You should swim about 200.
Right, and it was always so...
The lake in Rättvik is colder.
The water's very still.
Yeah. And that's, I have a sailing boat, but I have in the summer house, but I have it in the lake for some years. But that's when you are sailing.
I remember when we went all the way to the end and got in, it was freezing cold. But the boys were up there, so we had to
prove something.
go out there because the boys were all up there screwing around. And this was the big hangout.
We seem to have lots of pictures of Jillian. We had a week off the first summer we were there, and by this time we had purchased our own automobile, and we're headed north from Sandviken. We didn't have the time or the money to leave the country, but we're heading north from Sandviken to a resort area in the province of Dalarna, to a town called Rättvik, which sits at the foot of a lake called Siljan, Lake Siljan. We took quite a few pictures from the car to show the this Swedish countryside. You'll notice we're driving on the left-hand side of the road, and that the steering wheel is on the left-hand side of the car. So as you're driving, you're sitting on the left-hand berm of the road, which is very different to an American.
That may be where I'm thinking.
Oh, the
things go.
horses are crossing.
You can see this is late enough in the summer that the fields have been harvested. Now this is a river that is entirely carpeted with logs, which have been cut the winter before, put into the river much as we used to do in this country many years ago, floated down the river to the sawmill or to the mill. You can see behind the children a workboat, and the workboat is equipped with a couple of blades on the front of it, and it goes out in among the logs and herds the logs along the water into a little inlet where they are fed up onto a conveyor and eventually into the sawmill. A lot of the timber in Sweden is used for pulp paper. You can see by the size of the logs that this is probably pulpwood. The river was carpeted with logs for 2-3 miles up the river. Here's another field that's been harvested. You can see the wheat's been harvested, and the straw is rolled up into bales, more or less, to dry out. Very short growing season, but with the midnight sun, crops do surprisingly well, much like Alaska. There's a Shell gas station. Some wheat that has not yet been harvested. And some people working in the field. Here we're driving through a little village.
A stop sign.
That's the first one I've seen.
An appropriate place for one. That's right. Involuntary. What's he up to now?
Some more people working in the fields. Here we are in the town of Rättvik. For the first time, we're driving through town. We decided to go north up along the lake and see what it was like. Lake Siljan is about 40 or 50 miles long. It's a very large lake, very popular summer resort. It's a narrow dirt road. Here's our first real view of the lake. The couple you see there is sitting there sketching the lake from this particular vantage point.
Redfig. I'm not sure which. Did you hear,
We're back in the car going north along the lake again. Small villages. Here's an area where the buildings are built almost right on top of the road. That's a government building of some sort. Here we are back in the town of Redfig, and here is the beach on the lake. You can see there are a few people swimming in the water. But, well, there's a fellow in a canoe. Another one in a kayak, a few more people in the water, but the water is very, very cold. Never does get very warm. Even in the summertime in Sweden, 75 degrees is a very warm summer day. Never gets much warmer than that. Here we are in the town of Redfig.
Get a group of these guys.
The chubbiest guy is leading the pack. I'm going to turn and take a quick look.
There's a place to
What
pull
do I
out.
want to say? I think there's a road right here.
Oh yeah, pull out.
Maybe it isn't.
Pull over here. So it appears to maybe connect up at the other end. This is broken.
Between this bright sun and the window.
Might be better out this way rather than it. Get a little bit further up. That's a lighthouse you were talking about.
Yeah.
Here is in Stockholm. This is a natural history museum. The museum sat on a sort of a hill overlooking the city of Stockholm, and these are panoramic views of the city of Stockholm. Stockholm is built on a series of islands interconnected by bridges.
Wow. Isn't that the ball that Ola was talking about, or is that somewhere different? We pointed to from the big tower. There's our big tower there. That is.
No.
Here we are in the very center of Stockholm, and that's the King's Palace. Does not look like a Disneyland type of palace, but nevertheless, that is the King's Palace. And this is the little estuary in front of the palace. This is a branch of the Baltic Sea. Comes in through Stockholm. Across the estuary are some government buildings, and also the famous, I think that's the Palace Hotel, with the orange awnings on it. We're panning around almost 360 degrees.
Ja, folk tänkte bara hälsa er välkomna ombord MS Victoria och den här färden nu till Birka. Den här färden till Birka kommer ta i runda slängar 1 timme och 50 minuter och vår kapten, han heter Hans. Jag som pratar heter Andreas, jag är arkeolog specialiserad på vikingatiden och guide på ön och på båten.
We're standing in front of the palace, and here we come around to the palace again. The front entrance to the palace is guarded by a contingent of soldiers with gold helmets. And in just a second here, you're going to see the soldiers with their gold helmets. And as we watch, they're going to change the guard. You can see them, if you're real careful, you can see them marching up there. Here comes the relief contingent up the stairway. And they change the guard. This may well be taken from the boat as we were going out to the island, but I'm not sure. Sort of looks like it. As Göteborg is on the west coast, Stockholm on the east coast, the approaches to the city are just dotted with little islands. Well, these are pictures that were taken by either Laurie, I believe. She went on a trip to the island, I think, of Gotland. The island of Gotland was an old medieval trading center. Very wealthy before Sweden was a monarchy, and the country was pretty much dominated. That was Laurie's boyfriend, Ulla. There's Ulla's father and Laurie. And this is in the Middle Ages. This was a tremendous trading center in the Baltic Sea, and the Swedes dominated trade in those days and warred with the Russians. Seemed for a while they were continually at war with the Russians. So finally they came to their senses. This is a picture taken in Göteborg, or in Gothenburg. Ruth and I had come over to Gothenburg for one of the company annual meetings. We had come by train. We had left the night before by train from Sandviken, slept in a sleeper car overnight, woke up in the morning. We were in Gothenburg. The train was parked in Gothenburg. We got off, and here we're walking around the harbor before the meeting. The meeting on this particular summer outing was held on an island called Marstrand. That's my friend Pete Pruzan again. Pete later married a Danish girl, and as far as I know still lives in Denmark. In order to get to Marstrand, we got on a small open ferry boat and went out through the archipelago to the island of Marstrand. Marstrand has a hotel, beautiful hotel, operated by the Park Hotel. There's Ruth down by the harbor. The hotel in Marstrand operated by the Park Hotel in Göteborg. A beautiful hotel, open only in the summertime. Also on the island is a Viking fort that was built in, I think, 1049 to repel invasions by Vikings from Denmark. This is a picture of the Swedish luxury liner Gripsholm. If you recall, the Gripsholm was the ship that was involved in the collision with the Achille Laurel. In that collision, the Achille Laurel went down. The Gripsholm was badly damaged, but survived. This is a picture of the lady waiting for her fisherman husband to come back, and this is a plaque that talks about the settlers from Sweden that left for America. Swedes were among the earliest settlers in America. Here's a picture of a fellow that works with me in the company and his wife. They're both from Finland. And here we are on the ferry boat, heading out through the archipelago for the island of Marstrand. See, it's a very busy harbor, a lot of international shipping. Göteborg is also a shipbuilding center, very large shipbuilding center, and also the home of the Volvo automobile company, where all the Volvos are made. Some little islands out in the archipelago, primarily inhabited by fishermen. This would have been a Saturday morning, and here's a fellow on his sailboat out for a sail. There's a lighthouse on one of the islands. This is a fishing village on one of the islands as we pass by. Very major part of the Swedish diet is fish. Mostly herring with bunches of bones in it. Earlier in the film, we said we were on our way to the island of Marstrand. This film was out of sequence, but we're now on the ferry boat approaching the island of Marstrand. This is the castle on the hill. The castle dates back, as I said earlier, I believe to 1049. There's a couple of arms of land enclosed the bay. There's a Swedish windmill. The building with the orange roof to the left is a hotel. These are taken from our room in the hotel. They're showing on a Sunday morning the boys going down to the harbor with their sails in hand. They're going to a sailing class. As you can see, it was a beautiful, beautiful summer morning. There's Jeffrey Long walking out for his morning walk. Here's some of the houses on the island. Primarily a summer resort island these days. There's one of the fellas from the company. One of the fellas' wives from the company. Another fella from the company, American. John and Mike Zaban. This is a little graveyard on the island. Looks like a grave of a Viking. There's Lawrence and Eva Vanden Meisenberg. We're going for a walk up to the castle. We're going to see what this castle is like. Also, I can see the back of John and Mike Zaban. It's like Ruth and I, Lawrence and Eva. Mike Zaban must have been taking a picture. This is inside the castle. As you can see, it's in remarkable condition for a castle which is something over 1,000 years old at this point in time. Here's a Girl Scout troop that camped in the castle over the weekend. Here's the emblem on the castle, and I believe that says 1049. Here's a view from one of the ramparts of the castle. This island sits quite far out in the Atlantic, sort of guards the entrance to Göteborg. More views of the castle. This is just a little pool of water on the edge of the ocean. It's kind of pretty. There are the boys that you saw earlier out there in their sailing class. Looks like a lot of fun. What a pretty day.
Strax ett kort stopp i Rastaholm.
One of the natives had a little dog, little friendly dog. Likes Mike. Little Swedish boy. Have no idea whose boy that is. Typical Swedish boy. View of the harbor with the windmill in the background. That'd make a great painting. Here we are on the ferry boat, returning to Göteborg. Typical Swedish pose, face tipped up to the sun. Lawrence Van.
Och där kommer under en del av dagen min kollega Belinda stå med lite jordpåsar från den senaste utgrävningen i stadsområdet i Birka. De här jordpåsarna har vi arkeologer undersökt i Kristus i runda slängar. Birka var en stad som fanns åtminstone under första halvan av viking.
Meisenberg and Eva. Here's a fellow who's having a great time in his sailboat. So you can see there's a pretty stiff breeze that day. Here we are coming back into the harbor at Göteborg. Here we are entering the harbor of Göteborg. You can see there's a lot of shipbuilding going on. A lot of ship repair going on. This is a picture of the continuation of the pictures of the harbor in Göteborg. That three-masted clipper ship is the training ship for the Swedish Navy. It's one of the ships, incidentally, that appeared at the American 1976 bicentennial in the Parade of Tall Ships. Big, beautiful, I think a steel-hulled ship. These are just some flower gardens in the town of Göteborg, alongside the estuary from the ocean. It's like a yellow, what they call a yellow rain tree. This is sort of a canal that runs through Göteborg, and they have excursion boats that go up and down the canal carrying tourists. This is our first Christmas in Sweden. By this time we've left the house on Sprutgatan, moved to a row house on a street in English called 7th Street, in Swedish called Sjögatan. This is our Christmas tree with all the presents under the tree. This row house where we lived was really quite nice, very much like a two-story condominium in this country these days. Living room, large kitchen downstairs, and several bedrooms upstairs. There's Mr. and Mrs. Jultomten, the Swedish Santa Claus, and his wife. And here are the kids opening their presents on Christmas morning. We had a fair amount of difficulty finding colored lights for our tree. All the Swedish trees are either white lights or candles. Here's our first outing on cross-country skis. We brought all the kids and ourselves cross-country skis. Here comes Janie down the hill. David had made one aborted attempt to make it down the hill. You gonna try again? Didn't make it. No. Third time is the charm. Makes it all the way down the hill. It's like a tooth is missing. This is a winter's day taken from the street in front of the row house where we lived on Sjögatan. Probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun is setting, which gives it a beautiful, beautiful light. You can see we've had a recent snowfall. In about half an hour it's going to be dark. Sun comes up around 10 o'clock in the morning, just barely gets above the horizon, slides along and drops out of sight about 3:30, and it's totally dark. Of course, this is compensated for in the summertime by it being light all night long. Sun goes nearly down, but not quite in the summertime. Here's a fellow who's equipped the Cessna with some skis, and Sandviken sits on a lake, about a 15-mile long lake. This fella is giving people rides. Here's another guy with a ski-equipped biplane. He's also flying on and off the lake. Open cockpit. Looks like it might be a Stearman, but that's probably not what it is. Got to be a hardy soul to fly around in that weather. Denise and Jeffrey Long's daughters, Ann the oldest, and Sandra the younger, had gone for a ride on the plane. That was, and here is the first picture I believe that we have of Mark. Well, here's some early pictures of Mark. Now this is our house, the last house that we lived in. Mark was born while we lived in. No, Mark was born while we lived in the row house. And the second year that we were there, we moved to this house on Sprutgaten. It was a house that belonged to the steel mill that I worked with, and overlooked the lake. Not a really large house, but a really comfortable house. A nice big lot. We had room for garden. It had raspberry bushes, had plum trees, espaliered on the side of the house, and a really nice house. We rented it. Every stick of furniture and rugs and everything else we were able to rent and return when we left. So we really didn't have to buy any furniture. Well, there goes the Swedish train. This is a view from our house on Sprutgaten. That was from the backyard. This is from the front yard, overlooking the lake. One of the neighbors' houses. We didn't have any. We were the last house on the street. We really didn't have any close neighbors. There's old Mark out in the afternoon sun. You see, we got coats on. It's gotten fall again. Matter of fact, it's snowed. We got snow on the ground. This place also had apple trees, and we took the apples. They were very small and kind of scrubby, but we were able to take them to a local cider mill and get apple cider made from the trees in the yard here. Have no idea what variety they may have been. There's the sunset from our front yard, looking across the street and out over the lake. That has to be a sunrise, as a matter of fact, because we were facing east. In any event, it's a beautiful picture. Beautiful sunset. Now this is a picture taken from the front lawn of our house at Sogbacken, out over the lake. What's the name of that lake? David doesn't remember them. Now here's a shot that I later did a pastel of. Shows the islands in the lake. hook through there, through there. Our friend Jeffrey Long was a sailing nut. He went over to Yevla, bought a sailboat, and must have been late April, early May. We put it in the water, and very shortly thereafter it ran into ice. So we put it back on the dock. The next time we started out, we discovered that there's not only a bunch of islands you can see, but a bunch you can't see. Here's a picture of Jane and Mark. Picture David on his bicycle. I said we had room for a garden at this house on Sogbakken. Some things did tremendously. These are sweet peas. There's Ruthie taking a sun bath. You see it's getting on toward fall now. There's our, each of the kids had a little garden. Somebody planted, those are asters. I forget who planted those. You can see a few gladiolus. The real peas that we planted never did stop growing. I think those are Alan's sweet peas.
Mine right there.
That's David's? Talk loud. That's David's flower garden. This is the lady that used to come and help Ruth with the housework. Oh, Ruth would remember her name. I can't remember her name. They hadn't invented vacuum cleaners in Sweden. They just beat the hell out of the rugs. There's that was David in the kitchen at our house. There's young Mark asleep in the sun. There's Laurie and Ann Long. You can see the on the side of the house. You can see the pear trees espaliered on the side of the house. There's Jillian again. You can see our automobile in the background that we bought while we were in Sweden. Here's Ellen trying to do something with stilts. As I recall, she never did make it. Oh, here's David on his Flintabile. David and I built a sort of a soapbox racer with the material we had in hand, and Flintstones were very popular on TV at that time, so we called it a Flintabile. All the kids had a shot at it. Actually, didn't work too darn good. Sandra's doing pretty good. This is our yard, heading out to the street. I think Jane crashed it. There it goes. There comes David again. Actually, the steering wasn't too darn good. There's the trees on the side of the house. I think if I called them pears, it looks like they're plums.
They were plums.
Yeah. These are just some fall pictures around the property and around Sweden. Those are I believe barberry bushes alongside our house. This would have been the last fall that we were in Sweden. That was a picture of our house. Another one of my famous sunsets over the lake. This picture from our house taken out over Sandviken just as the sun is dropping below the horizon. Tried to take a picture of the moon. Actually better than I usually do. There's the town of Sandviken at night. I painted a picture of this same view also that we have. Not a paint, pastel. Not sure what that is.
It's not the midnight sun, is it?
Oh, David's right. That's the moon.
Is it the moon or the sun?
No, it's the moon. It's the moon shining across the lake. I wanted to get the path on the lake. I don't remember. These are...
That's when we went for the picnic by the river.
Okay, David says this is when we went for the picnic by a river. What's the, is that a power plant or something, David? Or a mill or something on the river?
I don't know. I remember the bridge and we went down off the road, down along the banks and had a picnic.
Okay.
And watched the logs rush by. And
Dave has better memory than I do. I don't remember where this river was. Evidently, as David said, we went out for a picnic, and I don't really remember where the river was. There's the bridge. It was really moving. I seem to be fascinated with taking movies of water. I got thousands of feet of film of water all over the country. There's David and Jillian. Notice how brown the water is from the leaf mold. There's Mark again. Oh, a pretty forest. A lot of wildflowers. We're on the wrong side of the road for this. Now we're back on the Swedish side of the road. Oh, this is a side. Well, this is I think on the way to Kungsberg. That's a church that we used to pass when we went to Kungsberg. I think this is the little village the church was in. Beautiful maple tree. I think a maple tree. There are very few trees that weren't yellow in Sweden. Almost everything was yellow. Mostly birch trees. Probably took the picture because that's the only maple tree in Sweden. Out on one of our famous, it looks like autumn leaf trips. Yeah, this is the graveyard of that church that you saw earlier. I forget how old that church is, but it's very, very old. Beautiful, beautiful little cemetery, well kept. You can see the wheat is all ripe. This is how they stack the wheat. Very distinctive. Looks like an army marching across the wheat field, leaning against the wind. Kind of neat. Have no idea how they do that, unless there's a stake down through the center. This is the lichen and other bare and low-growing bushes in the fall. As they do in Alaska, the thing that gives the most brilliant color in the fall are not the trees, but the ground covers. Oh, there's Ruth with Mark. This would have to be the fall of 1962, if he's there. She's standing on the top of Kingsbury again. Earlier on, we had some of the same views.
The train.
Oh, there's a train down there. David's right. That's probably, and that may be why I took the picture. There's the lake that sits beside Sandviken in the distance. You can see it's a fairly large lake. Off in the distance, if you could identify it, is the coal mine that is used to feed the steel mill in Sandviken. You can see it from this mountain. It's an underground mine. I think it's that white building back in the background, as a matter of fact, is the coal mine. There you can see this church again that we passed earlier. Unusual rock formation, looks like a whale with his mouth open. This is the path, one of the paths on top of the mountain. One of the nice things about Sweden is that you can hike or walk just about anywhere. People don't try to keep, there's somebody's summer cottage. You notice the sodded roof. Many of these cottages date back to the 16 and 1700s. And that's the end of our Swedish films. No, these are the school kids.
This is Jane's Girl Scout troop.
Oh, Jane's Girl Scout troop. Yeah, Janie took these pictures. She took the camera with her Girl Scout troop, went out on some sort of a orienteering thing where they had to find their way around the countryside by compass. There's David. There's David. Not David?
These are her classmates, the boys.
Boys from her class. Oh yes, these are just friends of Jane's. She has Ellen's neck with a camera. Oh, there's Jane's best friend. I don't remember her name. Pretty girl. I think one of the teachers who a row house in another part of town. This is an old steel iron making park outside of Sandviken. It's a place called Hugbo. Now these pictures are out of phase because these pictures were taken in the early fall, as you can tell by the leaves, and it was a beautiful fall day. This park is where they had the old iron furnaces. They used to actually dig the iron out of the lake and smelt it down and make steel. This industrial complex was what started the town of Sandviken. Most of the mills were steam powered. You saw the symbol of the town, the steam hammer. That was part of the part of this industrial complex. It's a beautiful, beautiful little park. And it was a beautiful fall day. Oh, there's a mallard duck. We're seeing lots of children. In America, not so many young families. These pictures, I believe, were actually taken the second autumn that we were in Sandviken, not the first autumn. There's the house of the guy that owned this industrial complex. Great big beautiful mansion. Steam engine that's on display in the park. It must be where David fell in love with trains.
You can see the sign.
I have to climb up in the cab and pretend to be driving.
Okay, let me do a wide one too. Right, now let me do.
The last 2 days, mostly around.
You notice all the trees are yellow. Almost all of the trees are birch trees. You'll see, the reason I know it's the second fall is because that's Mark in the stroller with Ruth, which means this is the fall of 1962. There's Mark out for a stroll with brother and sister. I think the next series of shots, we're panning around the park, and David is keeping up with the camera. You see the white birch? All of these houses are in the park, and they were all part of the original.
And in the winter by standing, but they are not good looking.
They don't taste good. Right.
One of my friends has a strawberry farm, but he's kind of retired from that.
Industrial iron making complex. That, I believe, was a machine shop. The original machines are still in there. Notice the beautiful stone wall on the end of it. These are some of the pretty. Oh, there's the old original Bessemer furnace. They were the first ones in Europe. As a matter of fact, the first people in the world to utilize the Bessemer open hearth
Take lessons, Paul, because of my
process. Guy in this country, in America, invented it, but couldn't find any takers till he got to Sweden, and they grabbed this technology and took off with it. Ever since, Sweden has been a tremendous steel-making nation. Steel mill where I worked was fully integrated. They had their own steel ore, they had their own coal mines. You can see that that said that the town began in 1866. I believe this is one of the dormitories where the workers lived. Beautiful flower gardens. You can see it's not lived in now. It's a museum. Bell tower. It says 1763, I think. That bell tower. There's a very old telephone kiosk. Telephone booth. I believe that's the dining hall. Here's the back in the town square in the center of Sandviken again. This is the big steam hammer that was the symbol of Sandviken. That's a party where the crew I worked with. I'm not sure, but this may have been my going away party at the hotel. If so, it's badly out of sequence. It's in the Stotz Hotel, that's for sure. That's Torsten Westberry, Søren Lufgren.